Hello there, good evening, and welcome to Political Scope. We are continuing our discussions and to examine the various sectors of the Guyanese economy and the everyday life of Guyanese over the past 12 months. I have with me on today's program the Honorable Dr. Frank Anthony, Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. Minister, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on your program.
Minister, having examined the past 12 months economically, politically for Guyana, if you were to make an assessment, how do you assess Guyana's performance and in all sectors over the past 12 months?
I think despite the challenges that we have faced in Parliament, that overall the government, we tried to do our best with the resources that we have had. However, I felt that if we've had the cooperation of the opposition, the people in Parliament, that Guyana would have been even further ahead, because there are many transformational projects that we felt would have done the economy, the people, enhanced the infrastructure of the country, that the opposition just, I would say spitefully, have blocked. And they're not looking at what these things can do for the people in the country. They're perhaps just looking at cheap opposition politics, and I think that's really sad. So we would have had to endure that over the last 12 months, and eventually we would have seen again how they would have pushed to have this no confidence motion and literally wanted to bring down the government over trivial things. So it's the kind of opposition that we're dealing with, and it's really regrettable, because if we could have had the cooperation, Guyana as a country, the people who they claim they represent would have had so much more done this year. Nevertheless, despite these challenges, I think we still were able to achieve a number of things, and it's where we are today.
You spoke about politically in terms of Parliament, what happened over the past 12 months. A number of critical pieces of legislation would have suffered as a result of what was happening in Parliament, and then the confidence motion that was before the House, and that would have come up for debate on the 10th of November. However, you would have managed to get the Cricket Administration Bill passed, and now the Cricket Administration Act. Let us talk a little about that piece of legislation, what it means for the sport, and what it means for Guyanese at large.
Well, as you know, over the last 4 years, we have been engaged in discussions and debates over what we need to do to put cricket, in order in Guyana. There have been a lot of challenges. There have been a lot of allegations, accusations by different stakeholders in cricket. We set up an interim management committee headed by Clive Lloyd, and he, with his team, went around the country and was able to garner views of how we can restructure and reform cricket in Guyana and allow for better governance of the sport. We were able to then draft a piece of legislation that is called the Cricket Administration Bill that went to Parliament, and eventually, when we laid it in Parliament, the Parliament asked us to send it to a select committee, which we didn't have any problems doing. So it went to a select committee, and the select committee took another 6 months or so deliberating over it, inviting all stakeholders to come for hearings at the parliamentary level. We concluded those, and eventually we were able to come up with recommendations of what we want in the Cricket Administration Bill. That then came to Parliament early in the year, and eventually It was sent to the president in August for his assent, and it has now been assented to. And the Cricket Administration Bill is now the Cricket Administration Act. It's now the law of the country, and it governs cricket in Guyana.
What this means for the sport itself, and how things will go, because we have seen the challenges that the sport would have faced in the past, which more or less somewhat triggered the move to have legislation in place to deal with the sport.
Well, I think when we spoke to all the different stakeholders, one of the things that were coming over, that the stakeholders themselves did not have confidence in how clubs are accredited, how many clubs there are, because everybody was saying that there were a number of phantom clubs that existed, and they only surfaced during the time when you have to get an elections. So people wanted to have a very clean list of clubs that were eligible to vote at these elections. So one way of addressing that, we felt that if someone is appointed a returning officer one day before an elections, they just don't have the ability of investigating whether these clubs are genuine or not. And so in the committee, we had a long deliberation on what can we do to remedy this. And we came up with a solution, and that is we wanted to have an ombudsman appointed, a cricket ombudsman. So this person would come in and would have enough time, maybe a month or two, to go through all the books, to check the existing clubs, to see whether they meet the necessary criteria for eligibility for that elections, to see whether it's financial and all the different things. And once they're satisfied, they will then allow these clubs to participate in the elections. So it starts at the club level, and then it goes up, to county boards and things of that nature. And then eventually for the county boards when they come to vote at the GCB level. So it's going to be an extensive process, but we feel that we need to have somebody that is impartial, and the duties of this cricket ombudsman is really well spelt out. And we feel that once we are able to get that done, many of the allegations that were made, we would be able to dispel with them. So that was one of the major contentions that the bill addressed. The other one has to do with the property of the Guyana Cricket Board. And one of the things is that the board itself, we understood that some of the property was transferred to privately held companies. So what this bill is doing is that whatever the assets were of the Guyana Cricket Board, that it would remove it from whichever private company it's being held in, and it becomes the asset of the Guyana Cricket Board. So I think that was another sore point where people were saying that these things were moved out of the Guyana Cricket Board. We're making that into the law. So whatever they were their properties before remains their property now.
The IMC, your ministry and the government as a whole, came under criticism from some politicians, including the AFC, Mr. Ramjatan, about wanting to interfere in the sport. He spoke about issues of accountability and transparency, and whether or not this bill will really, address those issues. Could you say whether those criticisms of accountability were really founded?
Well, interestingly, I think, sometimes people make all kinds of statements without understanding the issue. And perhaps Mr. Ramjatan would have made those statements without really understanding the depth of the issues. We had him, Mr. Ramjatan, when we had the select committee. He participated as a member of the select committee. And when these matters were being discussed, I suppose he got a better understanding of the issues. And during the discussions at the select committee, which lasted for about 6 months, he never raised any of these issues. So he participated, he worked along with us, agreed to some of the measures that we needed to put in place. And in fact, we didn't have to vote on a single measure that we came up with. We all agree by consensus. There wasn't any voting in the committee. So he fully agreed with what was proposed in the committee. But there was an interesting turn because when we came to the full assembly and I had to report on the bill, initially there was an attempt outside of the parliamentary chambers to again get the bill deferred, that we weren't ready for presentation. And we said no, that we are ready because we spent 6 months in the committee and we feel that this ought to go forward. And when we started to have that debate in the chambers, Mr. Ramjatan's position changed. And eventually, I think they abstained from voting on the bill, which is really, how to say, it's really a sad thing in a way because having spent 6 months discussing the bill in the subcommittee, one would have thought that if you had any objections to any particular area of the bill, that you would have raised them there so we would have been able to deal with it. And nevertheless, despite their non-support, we have been able to move the process forward. And I think many of the same issues that Mr. Ramjatan would normally champion about governance, this bill provides for good governance. When you think of transparency and accountability, this bill provides for transparency, it provides for accountability. Spell these out in a lot of details within the bill itself. So you can't on one hand talk about transparency and good governance and all of these issues, and when you are presented with an opportunity to participate in developing a piece of legislation that would entrench good governance practices and accountability and transparency and all of that, you then abstain from participating when you had the debate. So I think the public would have to be the judge of these matters. But I think it's important that people understand that.
I want to spend some more time, though, on the issue of cricket, since we're going to use the time to examine the sports sector. There are so many things happening in sport, but I want us to continue our discussions along the path of cricket. Of course, you've seen the return of international cricket to Guyana after all the issues and so forth, but your ministry will be making investments in this particular sport, like other sports.
Sure.
I want us to talk a little about some of the programs. I see you have a school coaching program that deals with cricket. Could you talk a little about that program and how it's going?
Well, we've been working with a number of primary and secondary schools, and we've been sending coaches into these schools to, first of all, we try to find a teacher in the school who are interested in cricket and work with them to make sure that they have the right skills to coach cricket within the school. And then the ministry would organize a competition so that the schools can come to this competition. And that has been working well. We have been doing this for a number of years, and I think through this effort, we feel that we are contributing to the development of new cricketers. In addition to this particular program, we would normally hold summer camps or summer academies, cricket academies, where we'll bring the best from different parts of Guyana to a particular camp. We would help them to enhance their skills in cricket, whether they're bowlers, whether they're batsmen, fielders. We teach them different skills so that they can enhance what they're doing. And we also offer, in some cases, training in terms of how do you captain a side and what are the things that are expected of you and so forth. And we feel that these programs are paying off because many of the persons who have participated in these programs at the under 15 level, we would have seen that they go on to play for Guyana or participate in our national team. So we are very happy with that program.
During the course of this year, the Albion Sports Complex was fitted with lights. I know it was a process to get to that point. It's finally up and it's being utilized. Let's talk a little in terms of what providing the floodlights at that facility itself, what it means for the community surrounding Albion itself, and sports and citizens generally.
Well, I think we have to look at it in a broader perspective, because Albion itself, we want to develop like a second international cricket venue in Guyana. And we felt that because of the passion that people have for cricket in Berbice, that it's a logical location to go to. And so we thought that if we're going to develop this facility, there are a number of things that we'll have to do. And lighting is one of them. So we have installed lights similar to the ones that we have at the National Stadium. And when we installed those lights, people said to us, first of all, people didn't believe that we were going to follow through in terms of installing these lights. They have said, that sounds like a big dream that, but you guys are not going to do it. So when they actually saw the lighting towers go up and lights being installed, they were very pleased. I remember when we went for the opening of the lights, turning on of the lights, and when the president did that, there were literally a couple thousand people that came out to see this happen. And they were extremely pleased. The comments that we got, the feedback that we got were extremely pleasing. And so one of the other things that we felt we need to do is to work with the community to see how we can develop the facilities there, the stands, the ground itself, because when it rains, they still have a challenge with flooding and all of that. So we have started working on a master plan. We have developed maybe what it would cost us to put in additional stands, take down some of the old ones, and things of that nature. So right now that program is on its way in terms of finalizing the master plan for Albion, including doing a different drainage system and also the outfield in terms of how we drain that outfield, so that if we're going to truly have a second cricketing venue, we need to do these types of works for that. But in addition to cricket, because with the lights now, Albion has been able to host a number of other events. So the Berbice Expo, for example, in the past, they would have had to rent lights and do all kinds of other things. Now it's very easy to do. Just like at the stadium where, for major concerts and things like that, the stadium has been used for these things. The people of Albion now can benefit with this type of lighting to have some of these major concerts and so. So it's not just, our primary motive was to do this for night cricket and night games at Albion. It is now serving a wider function for other community types of activity. And, again, we've had very positive feedback from the people living there.
Would you care to talk a little more in terms of, you touched briefly, there's a master plan for Albion, and some of the activities inclusive of fixing the stands and so forth. Would you care to go a little more in details in terms of what this master plan really is for Albion?
Well, basically, we have looked at the existing stands, the ones that we can keep, the ones that we have to repair, what kinds of dressing rooms that we'll need to put there so that we can meet international standards, so that international cricketers coming in here, there are certain standards that you would normally have to comply with. So in upgrading Albion, we'll need to put those things in. So we have been able to identify all of those, and we are now working on that costing, how much it's going to cost us. The outfield, for example, if we're going to prevent flooding, we'll have to remove that whole outfield, put in drainage pipes under it, and develop a totally new drainage system so as to prevent flooding. And the way that you build up the outfield would have to be totally different from one where it's totally clay to one where you will have clay and different layers of sand and pebbles and things like that, so that drainage becomes very easy. So things like that is what we've been working on. And we're at that point now where we have had the plan developed and we are now costing it.
Clearly, your ministry would have been placing a lot of emphasis on infrastructure development over the past 12 months. We've seen lights being installed as well at the Demerara Cricket Club ground in Georgetown. That was commissioned and it's in use and so forth. But let us talk a little more about the other infrastructural development that the ministry would have been working on. One of them being the swimming pool, the warm-up pool at Lilliandale.
Well, you know, a couple of years ago, we did complete the 50-meter pool. And at the opening of that pool, we made a commitment that we are going to do a 25-meter pool, which would serve a couple of functions. One, when we have international competition or competitions generally, that the 25-meter pool can be used as a warm-up facility. Because for swimmers, before an event, you have to swim and warm up so that your muscles are not, taut and all that. So that's one of the functions of this new pool that we are putting in. The other thing is that unlike the 50-meter pool, which is for competition, this pool has a kind of graduation in terms of its depth. And so because of that, we will be able to use this particular pool for training. And so it would have another function in terms of training persons who don't know how to swim. They'll be able to come there and learn how to swim.
In terms of, apart from the swimming pool, some work were done in quite a number of other areas, inclusive of a trademark facility over the river, the West Demerara, that is in case of the synthetic track. What has been happening in terms of preparations there?
Now that we have completed the 25-meter pool, the local contractor is now finishing off the one of the corboals. So by early next year, this 25-meter pool would be fully functional. We'll commission it and all that. And we are also turning our attention now to completing our flagship program, which is really the synthetic athletics track. Now, what we currently have at Lenora, we have been able to develop 22 acres of land from literally a grass field, a swampy area, into a modern athletics facility. We have an area designated for parking, just like the stadium, so the front part of the facility would be for parking. At this moment, we have not been able to tarmac the surface. That would have to come maybe in a future allocation. But we have a good roadway to get into the facility. The facility itself, we have completed the synthetic track itself. And the foundation work were done by local companies, but the track itself was done by Rugopol. Rugopol is one of the top German sports companies that lay these tracks around the world. And once they have completed that, we then went to the International Athletics Federation, and they would have been able to certify this track as a Class 2 track, which is a very important step. With certification, any event that we have on the facility, so if a record is broken, it would mean now that that record is accepted internationally. So this is a big step for us. It's a historic step, it's a big step. Because prior to this, for our athletes to be properly timed, a lot of them, and that timing accepted, a lot of them had to go to Trinidad or go to Barbados or go to some other international track to be able to be properly certified. We'll be able to do that here now, that our track is certified. So we have a certified surface. We now, on that surface as well, we have what you call 2Ds. You know, when you go around the bend of the track. So those Ds now, apart from where you run, we have put synthetic surface on these bends. And they're specially designated so that we can have other types of event. So steeplechase, for example, can be done now at the track. That's something that we haven't done maybe in a long time, if we have ever done it in Guyana. We have an area designated for pole vaulting. That too, I'm not sure whether we have ever done pole vaulting. Somebody was telling me that we used to attempt it at Borda and some of these other places. But of course, if it was attempted, it was not done in the ideal conditions. So we have specially designated areas where these things can happen now. We have a specially designated area for throwing of hammer, a specially designated area for throwing of shot put, specially designated area for throwing of javelin. So all these different sports where perhaps we weren't paying a lot of attention to them, we now have the facilities, the areas in which we can do them. On the other side of the track, we also have areas that are designated for long jump and triple jump. And these are all internationally certified areas. It would meet the requirements of the international body. So it's a very, you know, what we have there is a top-class facility. And I think when our athletes go there, they'll be very pleased by what they see. We have just completed 2 stands. We need to build more stands, but we have completed 2, so we'll be opening with these 2 stands. And under the stands, what we have done is that we have converted the area under the stands to become like storage rooms where we can put our equipment. We have changing rooms, administrative offices, and so forth. So all of that is completed. We are also building what we call a clubhouse. So that right now we are working on. We expect that to finish in the first quarter of next year. And once that is completed, we'll be ready to open the facility. We are also adding at this facility lighting. So again, we've had Moscow Lighting come in. They have finished, they've just completed all the towers and all that. A local contractor would have finished the base, and within the next 2 to 3 weeks, those towers are going to go up so that you'll have night lighting available at the synthetic track as well. We've been working with GPL and the Water Authority here to make sure that we have adequate water, adequate electricity, all the amenities that you need for a modern facility. So all of that is going in. And we are now basically putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And so by early next year, we'll be ready to open that facility.
But you spoke about the international certification and so forth, and you talked about athletes being able to time that it's accepted internationally. What does it mean, though, for Guyana as a country? What basically would have been behind in terms of athletics compared to the Jamaicas and Trinidad's of this world? What does it mean to the athletes in Guyana as a country?
I think this is a big move because here again, we got a lot of talent that perhaps go unrecognized because they don't have the facility, the opportunities for training and things like that. So with this new facility, we'll see people run faster, you know, able to time them, and hopefully they'll go on to represent us. This was what was missing for such a long time, you know, and we are now creating that opportunity for people.
Another initiative that your ministry would have been undertaking maybe for the past three years or so, is that of improvement at the level of community grounds. As simple and little as it may seem,
Yeah.
I understand quite a lot of work was done in improving community grounds. Care to talk a little about that?
Well, this particular project has been a very gratifying one because we have been able to go to individual communities and help them with their sports facility. Guyana is perhaps one of the few countries in the Caribbean where we have so many grounds. And one of the complaints that you get constantly is that the communities are not able to maintain these facilities. So in 2012, we started a new program where we started to offer to these communities grants. Um, we cap it at $1 million, and the community themselves would have to apply for these grants. A lot of communities apply, and we have helped them by giving them this money. So far, we've had a tremendous success with this program. I would say that there are literally hundreds of grounds that we would have done in all 10 administrative regions. And it's not only about doing the ground, but involving the community. They have been in charge. They would write to us and say, we want a little stand, we want to fix a bridge, fix fences, or, fill up the ground. Whatever it is that they want, we would work with them to make sure that this happens. And it has been really a good thing because it has improved the community grounds around the country.
I'm looking at some figures with regards to this particular project. And for example, in Region 1, in 2012, your ministry would have funded the same $1 million to fix 6 grounds in Region 1, for example, in 2012. But in 2014, 32 grounds,
Right.
a massive increase in the number.
Well, I suppose the first year, a lot of people were not aware that this facility existed. And so by the second year, they made sure that all their proposals are in. I think over the last 3 years in Region 1 alone, we probably would have done close to 60 grounds. Maybe that's about as much grounds that they have in Region 1. So it is a good thing. And again, when you go into those communities, people are very appreciative of what was done, especially all these sports clubs and all that, because for a long time they've been trying on their own, but now they're getting a little bit help to do this. And it's not only Region 1, you can, almost any region you can think about, we have been able to do grounds in these regions. And working with the local community, one of the things that we find is that we get more done. Because, for example, there are communities where people would say, we're going to use this money to buy the material. We, as the community, we're going to do volunteer work. We're going to do self-help to make sure that this stand or this bridge is built, and the money goes more directly to buy the material. And by that way, we would have seen much more done for the money that we are spending.
For the sake of our viewers, I will share briefly a breakdown of the 10 regions and what the kind of investment that was made with regards to improving community grounds. I outlined Region 1, 6 in 2012, 22 in 2013, and 32 in 2014, a total of 60 grounds. In Region 2, it was 10 in 2012, it increased to 20 in 2014. However, there was 53 in 2013, so you had more grounds last year, which I presume 83 in all so far. In Region 3, you have 73 grounds so far. Region 4, 90, Region 5, 54, Region 6, 98, Region 7, 10, Region 8, 23, Region 9, 31, and Region 10, 22. Then you have another listing here, Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport, 31 grounds. We're going to talk about that a little just now, but coming back to the communities, seeing a significant number of grounds across the 10 administrative regions. What does it mean for the community? Forget sport.
Well, these are community assets. So again, you would know that in a lot of these community spaces, apart from the sport that is being played, whether it's cricket, football, volleyball, or whatever they're doing, it's also used as a community space. So that's where people would have their concerts or, fairs that people would do, cultural fairs and things like that. So this is enhancing the space to do more of these types of activities. And it is really working well.
But I know for a fact, especially during budget debates, this program would have come under criticism from members of the opposition. Again, how much of those criticisms were well founded, and what has been the role in terms of those in the opposition in ensuring that these
Well,
programs become a success?
Well, I think, the opposition, they labor under all kinds of false illusions. And one of the things they were suggesting was that, people were not aware, and because of that, maybe we were biasing some of the, where we give people help and that kind of thing. But we have a totally transparent process. And that is, we put out an ad in the newspapers, we put them on television, through our youth officers, and so we communicate with people, we communicate to the regions. So as much people as possible, we let people know that this thing exists. All you have to do is that you just got to write a proposal, tell us what you want to do, and once we're able to receive those information, we then try to work with you to do the particular thing that you want in the ground. And a lot of people has taken up this offer, and I think now, whatever concerns they had in the past, by us getting out and doing things, that has dispelled some of that. So they don't have to come and try to make an argument in Parliament or wherever. They got to go to the community and see what this is doing for the community and see whether or not it's working. And I'm sure they'll convince themselves that this is a good program.
Tell us a little about the 31 grounds that were done under the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport this year, and where they're located, for
A
example.
lot of these grounds are in Georgetown and East Coast and East Bank because we felt that because they're closer to the ministry and people would come and talk to us directly, we felt that we wanted to have a more direct hand in working with these groups. And that's why you have 31 grounds that we have been administering from the ministry level.
So
a lot of school grounds.
This is in addition to the 19 Region 4,
Right.
a large chunk of this number also in Region 4.
Right. Most of these are actually in the 31 that we are talking about. It's really in Region 4. It's Georgetown, East Coast, East Bank.
You also works were done on a number of other existing infrastructure, gymnasium, Cliff Anderson, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I want to talk briefly about what is happening in terms of improvements in those facilities.
Well, again, these were all the infrastructure that we have in the ministry, but if you don't maintain them, then you will have problems with them. So the gymnasium, for example, we are seeing more use of the gymnasium since we have installed a synthetic surface there. You recall a couple of years ago, people didn't want to go there. Volleyball players didn't want to go there because they felt when you spike and you fell back on the floor that it's going to damage your joints. A lot of people didn't want to use the facility. So we've changed that. We've installed a rubberized surface, and now we are getting overuse of the facility. A lot of people want to go there and use it now. So we have volleyball, hockey, and indoor football, and so a lot of people are using it. Because it was an older facility, we noticed that the roof would leak from time to time. And over the last year, and this year too, we have been changing out a lot of the zinc to make sure that we have a better roof at that facility. We have also been working on lighting because that is important when you have these games. But again, like with all our facilities, sometimes we are confronted with a lot of challenges. From time to time, we will have people vandalize the piping structure that we have there. As you know, The back of the gymnasium is next to the Mandela dump site,
Dump site.
or the old dump site. And we'll find people coming in from that area and trying to take away like our black tanks and things like that for the water supply. So that's a constant battle that we have, and so from time to time we'll need to fix it and repair it and do things of that nature because of that kind of vandalism. Cliff Anderson Sports Hall, we have been able to do a number of things there. We have now installed a gym for a couple of years now, and that has been utilized by different people coming and doing workouts and things like that. We have a full-time trainer station at Cliff Anderson in the gym. The surface itself, the wooden surface, we did that back recently so that people who want to go and play there, they're now playing on a better surface. Ventilation has been an issue at Cliff Anderson, and we have tried in different ways to improve the ventilation, but it's still challenging. And we have recently installed a generator so that whenever you have blackouts, you know, we can power the facility on our own with our own generator. So that has been going on with these two facilities, and they're, you know, in good shape, better kept. And again, one of the challenges that we are having is that a lot of people are booking the facility and using the facility, so much so that we are having a scheduling problem, right? But I think that's a good problem to have.
The National Sports Resource Center, let's talk a little about that. That was opened earlier this year. A critical piece in the entire sport dispensation. Tell us a little about that facility.
Well, the reason why we did the resource center, we recognize that sometimes people think of sports as just something recreational, and you know, while it is recreational, the way that they think of it is a little bit demeaning. For you to be a professional athlete, for you to do well in sport, for you to be a professional coach, you have to study. You have to understand the discipline. You got to know a lot of stuff. And what was lacking in Guyana for a long time was really professional sports education. And we felt that if nobody is offering this, then we as the government, we need to provide an opportunity where people can learn the right way about the sport. So with that concept in mind of providing sports education, we have developed this center. So at the bottom of the resource center building, you will find a library, a sports library, dedicated to providing material on sports. So you have books. We have bought a lot of the best books in sports. You have a company called Human Kinetics out of the US that basically they publish only sports books. And with the latest research, latest techniques in sports, you know, they put all of this research in their books. So we have a wide array of books from this company, which we have bought. And in almost any discipline you can think about, you can go there and read up more about a particular sport. We have also been encouraging the national associations to talk to their affiliates and to get material which they can then donate to the resource center. Some of them have been doing that, so you know, we are slowly building that the amount of resource material that we have there. Football, for example, have given us a number of videos, DVDs on previous matches. You know, FIFA would normally do a lot of training videos, and we have quite a few of them now available at the center. So when a coach come to the center, if they want to review, for example, a football match, we have VCRs and DVD players and screens that they can utilize to view these things. If you want to go on the internet to go to a particular sports website, we have a number of computers that are available there that you can use to do your research. And so it's really trying to provide material on sports so that people can develop themselves. In addition to that, the upper floor of the building, we have created a classroom space. So in previous times, you know, it's challenging if you have a sports club and you're not making a lot of money, where you're going to host an event, where you can do a training session. We are providing this opportunity now, this classroom space, where you can get your training done, and it's done for a very minimal fee. So you know, you have a place in Georgetown now that you can come and do your training, and a number of the federations have been utilizing this. In addition to all of that now, we in the ministry, we have decided that we're going to implement a number of training courses that the ministry is going to pay for. And so during the year, you would have find that we did a training course dealing with sports management. We invited the University of the West Indies to partner with the ministry, and we had Olympic medalist Grace Jackson coming down and working with us to deliver that course. It was done over a 3-day period, and I think the people who came to the course, you know, expressed that they would have benefited a lot by the kinds of information that was shared and so forth. So that was one of the courses that was held at the facility. In addition to that, you know, a lot of athletes, a lot of officials, a lot of administrators, they don't know much about anti-doping. And we felt that it is important that we share this type of information with the sporting stakeholders in Guyana. There's a very comprehensive list of prohibited substances that if an athlete is, you know, if they do samples, blood samples or urine samples, and these chemicals are found in your sample, that you can be banned. And some of it can be in ordinary medication. But many of our athletes do not understand what it means to get a therapeutic exemption. How do you go about getting an exemption? If you got a common flu and you use a medication, and then in 2 weeks' time you're going up for competition, you're supposed to apply for an exemption. Many of them don't do this because they don't understand, and their coaches perhaps did not understand. So we are now training people about all these methodologies and things like that, and the Regional Anti-Doping Agency had a session here where we taught a lot of these things. This is going to be a standard program. Every year we're going to run anti-doping programs in Guyana, so people can look forward to that, and we'll build a wider cadre of people who would know more about anti-doping. In the particular disciplines, whether it's cricket and football and all these different things, we would have held different training sessions relating to them. And an interesting one that was done there dealt with hurdling. As you know, we had the American athlete that was here, and she did, you know, a good job in explaining to the young athletes and people interested in hurdling what it would take to be a good hurdler. And I think those sessions went down very well.
Your ministry also worked on a number of other initiatives. You had courses, I know, short courses in umpiring, captain, and scoring, etc., etc. Just tell us generally what some of the other programs that the ministry would have embarked
Well,
on.
one of the things we partner with the Table Tennis Association, for example. We had an international coach that came in from the International Table Tennis Federation, and he was able to do level 1, level 2 training here. So a number of persons now have been trained at these levels. And it's good because we're getting more coaches, getting more people certified. So that's just one example. We would have had people coming down here in boxing, for example. In swimming, we did certified courses in swimming. So these are things that would help the particular sport to develop in Guyana, and we are getting more trained and certified people. I think that's important. If we're going to make a qualitative difference, if our athletes are going to do better internationally, then we have to get coaches that are properly qualified. And we have seen in the disciplines where we have qualified coaches that our athletes are really doing well. A good example of that is in squash. We have one of the best trained coaches in Guyana. And you would have seen a standard of excellence over the last several years that is unsurpassed in the Caribbean. So we have to aim to do more training and to improve the level of coaching that we have, to certify our coaches at higher levels.
We're almost out of time, but I want us to touch on at least two other areas, and one has to do with rugby. We've seen the performance of our national rugby team over the years. In terms of the ministry working with the association.
Well, the ministry has been working with rugby. The president of the Rugby Federation, many of the executive members, they know they can count on the ministry for various levels of help. And in fact, rugby has benefited tremendously from inputs of the government. You know, when they have to go on various competitions, they normally would come to the government for assistance. And the government has been quite generous to rugby. The last competition they had, the government contributed $5 million to them, and that is what facilitated them going to that particular competition. We would have had previous competitions where they would have benefited. They went to a competition in Las Vegas, for example. Government assisted with providing the resources for them to get there. When they went to the Commonwealth Games, for example. So the government has been working with them and providing the resources necessary for them to go. But it's a challenge because we have 30-something associations, national associations, federations in Guyana, and sometimes it's difficult to provide for all of them. And what would be more helpful is to get some of these associations to develop national plans, what exactly they'll be doing, how they'll be improving their particular sport, and to cost it. And for us to get an understanding of some of these things in a timely manner, because the budgets are done almost 1 year before, right? So if we don't get these things, and if you're coming 1 week before an event, it's very difficult for us to sometimes provide the resources that you're asking for. But if you know the calendar of competitions that are coming up, and you're able to come and talk to us, then we'll be able to maybe allocate some of the resources in advance.
This year would have been a very challenging one for football. We've had quite a number of issues with football. The FIFA, I know government involvement in football is more or less a no-no at this point in time. However, FIFA would have ironed out some of the issues, installed a normalization committee, and I saw recently comments about the ministry working with the normalization committee to get at least the FIFA Gold project off. How have things been going with that?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's a no-no for government to be involved. I think FIFA's position really is that they want governments to be involved. I've attended a meeting about 2 years ago in the Cayman Islands where you had ministers from around the Caribbean, you had FIFA president there, and they basically were saying that they can't go it alone, that they need governments to be partners in football for the development of football. So I think this myth that people probably have of governments not being involved, FIFA themselves, they feel that government should play a more important role in the development of the game. And I think that's a very enlightened position. In Guyana, for some time now, the Gold Project has been on the cards. Many of our Caribbean counterparts would have moved ahead, and they are Gold Project 5 or 6. We have, for whatever reason and whatever difficulties, we were not moving ahead. We have offered to the GFF maybe more than a year ago, that what we want to see is the development of a good football facility, a facility of excellence in football. The people at the CONCACAF level, they are willing to finance this. And they have said to us that with the monies that were not used over the years for the Gold Project, that they're willing to allow Guyana to develop a broader institution, if you like, a broader facility for football. The football people came to us and said, well, if we're going to develop this, we needed some land. And we have said to them, we are willing to work with you. And we have allocated approximately 10 acres of land at Lenora, next to the synthetic athletics track, for the development of this football facility. Right now, well, we had started this discussion with the previous executive of the GFF, and we want to sign an MOU with the GFF then, but we want to make sure that whatever we are signing is that we are going to develop a proper facility. So those discussions had, we started them, we were never able to complete them, and I'm very happy that now that you have a normalization committee, that the normalization committee would have picked up on these discussions. So hopefully we'll be able at some point to conclude these discussions so that we can start building this facility.
Finally, Minister, just to wrap this up, I know we're almost out of time. We spoke about a number of issues, a number of areas where interventions are made with regards to sport. How much of this is being filtered into the hinterland areas?
Well, we are actually doing quite a lot of work in the hinterland areas. Just one example is that early this year we have hired 5 sports organizers in Region 9. And you know the terrain of Region 9, so it's difficult for people to get around. But what we have done is to identify sub-regions, have the sports organizers come from that sub-region, and then we gave them each a motorcycle so that they can move around to the different villages. And they have been providing us with some good programs, and we want to work on this and make sure that we have more programming, more competition in these areas. How we envisage this to work, if it work out like how we envisage it, we are going to replicate that in some of the other hinterland regions. So you can expect us to have maybe many more sports organizers in these hinterland regions. And I think it's going to do good for sports and for those communities.
Honorable Dr. Frank Anthony, Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. Unfortunately, we weren't able to examine culture and youth. I hope you can come back at some other time so we can examine that, the critical areas. Yeah. But I think we have had quite a fruitful discussion in terms of highlighting the efforts of the ministry over the past 12 months to improve facilities and sport generally in Guyana. So again, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And I want to thank you very much for joining us too. Have a good rest of the evening.